Hi, guys. Before you get into the next amazing conversation with another amazing guest, I just wanted to tell you I have now moved over to Substack. So it's the Never Settle Podcast.substack.com. The reason I've done that is because of the increase in censorship I am finding on YouTube, and I'm worried that maybe one day they're going to deplatform me. So please head over to Substack and subscribe. I'm very new into it. It's growing. There will be a lot more content on there going forwards and hope to see you over there. Well, hello, lovely listeners, and welcome, viewers. Today, I have the wonderful Tim Sanders. Now, Tim is new to me, I have to say, but I do know that he's been on the Voguesy show a few times. But Tim is all about talking about how science has been completely inverted and perverted. He's all about frequency, and he's all about helping people to harmonize their body from the constant attack that we're all getting from all of these bloody devices that we're all now hooked on and control our lives. I think that's a fair assessment, isn't it, Tim?
It's everywhere, and it's not going to stop. It's only going to get worse with the Internet of Things and Wi-Fi, cell towers, 5G. It's a constant bombardment. Yeah.
Yeah. So, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you. We've had a brief conversation prior to jumping on because Tim's internet is not the strongest. However, right now it's behaving itself. So, forewarning, if it gets a bit choppy, it's just crap internet in the southwest of England. That's all it is. All right. So, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, great to be here.
So, I'm just going to close down WhatsApp on my thing because otherwise it's going to keep pinging while we're on. Um, so where do you want to sort of start? I would like to know a little bit about you, to be honest, your backstory. I
Sure.
think I think you were having health problems, and that's what really kickstarted you into the research that you've done. But give us a little bit of a backstory. Were you ever a normie, Tim? Did you wake up in 2020 like millions of others, or were you already alternative in your views?
Oh, I think I've always been a little bit of a rebel stroke kind of, seeker. I guess one of the big turning points for me and everyone was 9/11. None of that added up. None of that added up. And, it kind of split people into two groups, I think. A minority that was just like, wait a minute, we're not being told the full story here. And then just everyone else who just went, oh, that's terrifying and horrible, but let's get on with life as normal, whatever. But yeah, I sort of I don't can't remember whether before or after that I was, becoming a bit of a junkie for alternative truths, and whether it be David Icke or Michael Tsarian or other people like Drunvalo Melchizedek and other people, and Greg Braden, and all those kind of people that were all kind of beacons of an alternative version of our history, reality, biology, that kind of thing. So I think I've always been deep down on that path, but there's then the catalysts, aren't there? There's the thing that just go pop, and it's like, well, like 9/11 or COVID for a lot of people lately, that weren't maybe truthers before then. They I was starting to realize that, the government isn't our friend, corporations are not our friend. And all the advice we're getting is often, skewed or wrong. And, I've recently, I would say, since I set up my company, which is Omnia Radiation Balancer, um, got to learn the true concepts in science from a master of science who's published like 41 papers, but unfortunately they will never go mainstream because science is kind of used against us a lot of the time, so that we are kept small, so that we don't realize our full potential, and so we don't understand what the universe is really made of, which is light. And we often talk about love and light, and and refer to light. But if you were to understand that every atom is a torus field of light, which I'm sure we'll get into, then you open the door for lots of things, whether it be your healing journey, whether it be free energy, whether it be, you know, um, the power of your own conscious intent within the hologram of light, which is a really interesting topic because a lot of people are getting like really pressurized and feeling, you know, angst ridden and, you know, going through a lot of trauma and struggling with their everyday lives because of all the bills and, you know, all of the nonsense that's going on. And of course, what does that do? It throws you off the path that you could be on, which is basically being in your center and being, you know, full of positive intent, because we're on a plane of good of free will, where we're deciding every hour, every minute of every hour, whether we're choosing, you know, fear or love, basically. And at the moment, there's just a
lot of fear.
ton load of fear, right?
Yeah, it's
As we
really
go through all these changes.
it's really interesting listening to you because you know, my prior to COVID, I was still in the corporate world, but for years and years and years, I've been trying to get out of the corporate world by finding something else, something to replace the rat race, you know, passive income here or doing my own business there or whatever it might be. And following my purpose because I knew, you know, being in the corporate world, that is not who I am. I was always the gobby one that wouldn't quite like what the management were trying to do to customers. I was always on the side of the customer, and you realize quite quickly, especially when you're in sales, that customer comes last, not first. So,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so there was always a rub there for me, and so over the last few years, I sort of when I got made redundant in 2020, I really started to pursue my purpose, which was for me at that time, um, like a sole purpose coach, you know, helping people to discover their own purpose, to be able to live a much more content and fulfilling life. And then, I mean, I've always been a challenger. I mean, I was looking at some old, I had to clear out some stuff recently, and I was looking at some paperwork right back from 2013, and even before that, where I was challenging the finance crap, the contracts. I've got myself into court a few times, a long time ago. Been in the court a lot over the last 12 months. And so I sort of started a long time ago, but I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was talking about, but I just know the whole thing was fraud. Then you jump into love and light and the purpose and wanting to spread that joy to other people that were living a miserable existence. Then COVID happens. Then I got blown. I mean, I've always questioned things, but not really massively in terms of um, all of the conspiracies that lots of people kicked into from 9/11. But yeah, I mean, every single rabbit hole I went down, every single rabbit hole, and it consumes you. And now, because I've been in the courts challenging, I feel like I've been, like you said, pulled back into the fear, into the dark, and all the rest of it. And it's been quite a challenge for me to weigh that up. Am I doing the right thing? Should I go back to love and light, you know, and all of that? But for whatever reason, I know that my journey and my mission is to be right here, right now, and having this conversation with you. Because I've been able to give a platform to people to get their voice out there, to um, spread the love and light through how people can empower themselves, and also solutions like what you're offering as well. So it's interesting because as much as we're trying to stay out of the fear, when you're challenging the system and you know what's going on in the system, it's really easy to get sucked back into it. And you have to keep realigning yourself, bringing yourself back to the center as much as you can. But boy, that's not easy sometimes.
Well, I mean, you're a system breaker, aren't you? I mean, I've seen a lot of your shows, and you know, there's no holding back, you know, and I admire that. I'm not necessarily a system breaker. I'm more of a kind of like, you know, a new system opener, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's as the system breaks up, there's going to be more and more release of all of this, you know, angst and toxicity and all those sort of things as we clear it, because that's the phase that we're going through right now, where we're transmuting all of those old systems that were there to imprison us. And the dark side has no option but just to double down, treble down, you know, quadruple down on their tyranny and their control systems, like we're seeing with the digital ID right now, which is like, you know, we've seen your 3 million petition, you know, 3 million strong petition about not wanting digital ID. but we're just going to go ahead with it anyway. And that's going to just cause even more, people to wake up and realize that maybe the government isn't our friend, which people like us concluded a long time ago. So yeah, we're in, choppy waters at the moment. There's no two ways about it. It's going to get worse, I think, before it gets better. But we have to understand our own personal power, but also understand the physics of the personal power as well, which is something that is really interesting to me. And I'd love to share with your audience, because once you understand the true concept of the atom, you'll have a lot of aha moments in terms of like how strong or how important your conscious intent is. And of course, you alluded to this just at the top of the show, where you said, you've been through health issues. Yes, I have. And I was dealing with stress for a long time in my life. And in the corporate rat race that I was in, I ended up just beating myself up and going into a very, very negative thought spiral where I ended up having a breakdown. And I suffered really badly because of that. I lost control of my breath, and I was just flooded with negative thoughts about all sorts of things. It just didn't take anything to trigger it. And that's really scary, when you're out of control of your body, and you're out of control of your thoughts as well. And that was, it's the old cliche, but that was actually a breakthrough for me. It was like stripping me down to absolutely nothing. I didn't have anything. It was like, right, how do I put the blocks back together again? And what do I want to be when that happens? That kind of thing. So I started that at that point. I started getting into yoga because I needed to get, control of my breath back, and then meditation, and then, going down that path to understand, what's this all about, and I wouldn't say that I'm any saint in any way. I've been in situations where I've done myself in on many levels, but right now I'm on a path of sort of healing and just keeping everything very kind of like non-toxic. And when I met the scientist who developed my product, which harmonizes all electromagnetic field radiation, not only did I get the benefit of that product and felt the benefit straight away, because when you're stressed you become hypersensitive to certain things, and I was certainly very sensitive to EMF, electromagnetic field radiation. And I would argue that every single person is, by the way, because everyone that we test shows that their body is weakened in a simple muscle test. Every time you test the body's strength, you can do a muscle test where you basically pull down like this, people will be strong, and then you put a phone in their hand and do the same test, and their body goes weak. Why? Because these things are so powerful nowadays. They're emitting so much imbalanced toxic energy that's pulling in the data into devices. And the body, as we're going to get into, is entirely electric or light. An electric current is the same thing as light. And so, as Nikola Tesla said, everything is the light. So what did he mean by that? What he meant by that is that every atom is light compressing itself into matter in the form of a torus field. And if you don't believe me, because we know what torus fields look like, right? They're like donuts. Donuts with a hole in the middle. So I think now is the good time to show you this, which is something that I often ask people, what do you think these are? And they'll probably say, well, that's a nice tray of donuts, but these are blood cells, right? So our blood cells are torus fields of light. And this is something that's being hidden from everyone, because
say that again. Our blood cells are
torus fields of light, of electric current. So it's like when Tesla said, everything is the light. What he means is that every atom is light compressing itself into what we label as matter. Then what I've found from the scientist who developed my product is that the way that light behaves is really interesting, because in the holographic universe, the universe made of light, which, is being airbrushed out of our science textbooks because they try and pretend that an atom is a proton, neutron, electron, and it has a nucleus in the middle, which is basically the matter, and everything else is like 95% space. No, the atom is 100% light, and at the middle of the light ring is empty space, as you can see here, in a cell, in a blood cell. But if you want further proof of that, then I could show you this, which is a picture of electric current passing down a glass tube.
Looks like
So
a
down this,
lightsaber, Tim. Looks like a lightsaber.
it does look like a lightsaber. But what's interesting about this is that it totally challenges the notion of electrons, right? So in your physics textbooks, because you have to imagine that this is a glass tube and there's a cathode at one end and an anode at the other end. And so what's happening is you're passing electric current down a tube, which is filled with a gas so that we can see what electric current looks like. And that electric current should, according to our textbooks, be like bullets, like little pellets of bullets passing down the tube. But actually what we see is a centering magnetic point like this, and we see light rings or torus fields passing up and down the tube, right? So when we see that electric current is a torus field of light, blood cells are a torus field of light. When we know things like the Heart Math Institute, which has shown that there's a torus field of light energy around the body, one to, a strong field to about 3 feet, and then a weaker field to about 12 feet. When we understand that we are light beings and that light behaves in a certain way, then we can take a lot more control over our health. And we can also understand exactly why wireless radiation is harmful to us, whereas the sun, which is a radiation field that is hotter and higher frequency, does not harm us in the same way. So I've done tests on my blood where I've held a cell phone for 20 minutes in my hand, and it changes the way that my blood looks. So I'll show you that one as well. So I don't know if people can see this well, but basically, if you look at the middle picture, this middle picture is basically showing the result of me holding a cell phone in my hand, watching a video for 20 minutes. And you can see the effect is basically of a clumping or an adherence of all of the blood cells. It's basically called rouleau. And rouleau is not a disease, but it's not desirable, because the desirable look is for you to have nice, perfect torus fields, like, this picture or like this picture. That's the way healthy blood should look. And you're always going to get a little bit of this in a blood sample, right? But ultimately, when I did this sample, and you can see this on my website, the whole of the sample turned to rouleau, like the whole thing.
What could that mean in terms of, like, if you've got that going on in your system? Because I'm thinking of my son, I'm always thinking about my son, who's been having health challenges for over 2 years now. And he thinks it's chronic fatigue syndrome, which seems to be rife, which is the new name for ME. But there's also anxiety, panic attacks, all that sort of stuff. And like every young person, their phone is strapped to them, their laptop is strapped to them. And older people now, but the younger are always on it, even more so. And I keep telling him not to put it on his body and all this, that, and the other, and he's still got the bloody wireless buds and that kind of stuff. So what could that physically look like in symptoms if your blood is continually in that state?
So what happens is, if you have rouleau syndrome, then the blood can't pass through the capillaries as well, because it's all chained up. And also the oxygen doesn't get to the blood either. So it's basically stress. It's the platform for dis-ease in the body. So let's get into what's happening here, right? Because this is really interesting. A blood cell, if you imagine that torus field of light, okay, how it operates. I'm going to get into how it operates. And by the way, no one should just take what I'm saying as the absolute, end of all truth or whatever. I'm just sharing the knowledge that I know through the scientist who developed my product, which is a body of work, like 41 papers showing with evidential proof, lots of alternative truths in science. So
Before
I'm
you get
always open.
before you get into that, how did you meet Laki, who is the scientist?
Yeah, so I met Laki at Michael Tellingers Ubuntu festival back in 2019, I think it was. So Michael Tellinger is a well-known researcher. He runs Ubuntu and also One Small Town. I've been following him for ages, and a friend of mine was going to his festival and said, "Oh, you'll love this." And I didn't have a job at the time. I'd just come back from living in Singapore, and I didn't have a job. But I just thought, you know what, this is going to be amazing. And I'm going to meet so many amazing speakers and people. And it was amazing, you know. And he had some incredible speakers talking about free energy and the pyramids and, you know, animal conservation and all sorts of different topics, which are really cool. Um, and this guy Laki was doing a talk, and you know he was doing a talk about free energy. And halfway through, he said, "Oh, and by the way, I've got the solution to all of the radiation problems in the world." And I was like, because I've been looking for a solution to my radiation sensitivity, right? And I said, "So what have you got?" And he showed me these stickers at the end of his talk, and I was just like, but those are stickers, you know. Everything else I've seen has got a crystal in it or a chip in it or something like that. I said, how are you doing this? And then he took me on a journey to understand that everything is the light, you know, even there is light in that sticker. And so if you can make a breakthrough in your consciousness to understand that we could have programmed light in a sticker that could change the vibration of the EMF so that when the sticker is on the phone, then you change the vibration around all of the energy that's coming in and out of the phone so that it is now in rhythmic balanced interchange, and it is now resonant with the electrical currents of the body. Because what the problem is with EMF is that if you imagine that it is also a torus field with light as a ring like this, and inside, this is something that I didn't mention earlier on, but inside the torus field is empty space, as we saw in the blood cells just now. But inside that empty space is the magnetic point, okay? Because it's an electromagnetic field. And that magnetic point resides at the center of the torus field of electric current or light. And what happens with EMF, unlike sunshine, is that magnetic point starts to jag around. It starts to basically drag the light ring out of balance. So we have imbalance between the light ring or the electric current and the magnetic. And that doesn't happen in the sun's rays. The sun's rays basically perfectly balanced and centered, where the magnetic point is absolutely dialed in to the geometric center of the wave field.
Another reason why they're blocking the sun out.
Exactly. So the sun is the giver of all life. We would have nothing to eat without the sun. You know, it is a positive, you know, good vibration, radiation field, right? The EMF that's made by man is the opposite. And if you really want to get into it, it's actually conscious intent that moves that magnetic point around. And incidentally, we are also, as the captains of our electric light body, we are responsible for the balance of electric current in our bodies, right? So we, as we mentioned earlier on, we are sold programs all day of fear, lack, and scarcity, and we often gobble those up and take them as our truths. And then we often encode them in our bodies as the only truth that, you know, we can't get away from. And, you know, the opposite is actually true. Whereas you can program your body with love and light and abundance and gratitude and forgiveness and all those other good things. You choose, right? But with EMFs, you don't choose because you're being blasted by all of this imbalanced energy around you. And until you've balanced it out, your body is going to be listening to all of these imbalanced energy fields around you. And what it does is it resonates in sympathy with that imbalanced energy around you, right? So it picks up. So if you can imagine that there is a magnetic point inside all of our blood cells, and these are perfectly healthy blood cells. But if you imagine that there's a magnetic point inside all of these blood cells here, and it listens to the imbalance of the EMF, and it copies its rhythm and pattern so that you get a situation like this, the middle, the middle picture here. Sorry, I'm having trouble, looking at this and pointing in the right place. But do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like these are all blood cells that are now listening to imbalanced energy fields and picking up its vibration and resonating in sympathy with it. And what that is basically dissonance. It's basically dissonance, which is basically picking up a bad vibe and feeling that bad vibe in the body. But most people don't actually feel it until we've done something like a muscle test where their body goes, you know what, I really don't like this EMF. And incidentally, just to finish that off, when you put our stickers on the phone, which look like this, and you do the muscle test, the body goes super strong. And there's hardly any other products out there that pass that test, a simple muscle test. And you can see all those details on our website.
Okay, so we are testing the Omnibalance sticker for your phone. This is to prevent and protect yourself against all the harmful radiation. And I've got Tim Sandars on my podcast today, and so I thought I want to test it before I actually put this up. So we've already been playing around with this test, and we're quite amazed at the moment. So here we go. The test is, if you can see, Mick here, my wonderful model, he has got his arms behind him and he's interlinked his fingers, and then all he does is he stands straight. And then the test is, you put your arm straight like this against his back and you basically push down with your fist. And the idea is you check in the balance and the core balance of the body. So here we go. This is no phone, nothing. And as you can see, he sort of sprung back. So I'm going to try that again. And he springs back. Okay, I'm going to pause it. Mm. So this is my old iPhone, which has got no stickers on it whatsoever at the moment. So we're going to pop this into Mick's back pocket and we're going to do the test again. So he hasn't moved at all. Same test, straight arm. And I'm going to put it into his fist again and pull down. And I kid you not, this is not a joke. I'll do it again.
Well, anybody else can test it.
Pause it again. So these are the little stickers, the Omnia Balance stickers, very small and discreet. I'm just going to take that off. I'm going to put it there. Okay. So this is now supposed to be complete protection. So put that back in your pocket. Resume the position. Can you see that all right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's try it again. Wow. Magic. Fascinating. I was going to say, is that the same theory? So like if you think about a woman's monthly cycle, or if you think about those, when you see those experiments where a load of ticking clocks are put in the same room and eventually they're all ticking at the same time, or those balls that go tick, 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 you know what I mean? And all of that.
Yep.
And, you know, if you have women working in the same office, eventually they all seem to have a cycle at the same time. So is that the same sort of theory, because we are all light and everything is all light and it all works on the same torus and resonance? Is that why that happens?
100%. So the best example that I can give of that, of what you're saying, is if you take two guitars, right, and you put them next to each other, and on one guitar you pluck, let's say, the A string, right? So you got them very close together, you got 6 strings, and you just pluck the A string. What happens? Only the A string on the other guitar vibrates.
Oh, really?
Right?
Okay.
And this is really important because none of the other strings start to vibrate. And what I'm all about is showing people live examples and things that are just undisputably true, right? Which is that if you have a frequency band that is similar, right, which you might have with women because they're all walking around as cell towers, right? You are towers of cells that are all vibrating with electric current. And if you're walking around and you're vibrating in a certain way, then that can be picked up by the next cell tower and the next cell tower when you're in proximity, right? But even sometimes when you're not, because some people can pick up what other people are thinking, around the world. And this is how it all works, right? And the way it actually works is through that magnetic point. You remember I talked about the fact that that magnetic point is at the center of the torus field. That magnetic point is the 0 point. That is the 0 point field. Why is it called the 0 point? It's called the 0 point because it has zero electrical potential. It's a magnetic point. And a lot of people talk about 0 point energy. Why? Because that 0 point is giving the energy to the electric current, right? That is effectively the God field because it's the field that gives all of the light to all of the atoms, the infinite amount of atoms in our light-filled holographic universe, right? So, lots of people struggle with this because they're like, oh, either I don't believe in God or, I believe something else. Well, fair enough. But that's what I've learned from Laki, and it really gives me an aha moment because it's like, if I'm consciously interacting with that 0 point, well, what do I want to fill my day with? I want to fill my day with positive stuff, right? So that 0 point gets to the absolute geometric center of my blood cells, and I'm in good health and stable in terms of my mental kind of, my mental state. And, as I've said earlier on, I've had times in my life where I've lost control of that mental state. So I know how important it is. So all of this that I've learned through Laki has had a very direct impact on my health, but also has helped me to, get over my EMF sensitivity and also hopefully help lots of other people because our products are very effective.
Okay, so 2 questions that sort of came up there. So I've said to you, I've got an Orinoco frequency pod that I've opened up for people to come and have free sessions and continue having sessions if they wanted to. Because the frequency that's being emitted within the pod is the optimal health frequency. Now, if somebody's coming and having these sessions, and let's talk about, I'm sure you do, the energy enhancement centers that are operating the cubes, scalar energy.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. So if somebody's going to either an EE center or coming to a pod like mine or having some other kind of frequency healing, but they're continually being bombarded by EMF, let me put it a different way. So if somebody's body is completely out of balance because of the amount of EMF that they are subjected to, and they're either highly sensitive or maybe less sensitive or whatever, if they come and have some frequent sessions in whatever frequency healing it is, that frequency healing isn't going to be able to be effective. Would you agree with that?
No. I'll tell you why. Basically, as electrical light beings, we are yo-yoing, right? We're going up and down and all, we could have, I frequently have bad days on the computer where nothing works and I go into a rage and, but that's just one example. You could go out and have a few drinks of wine, glasses of wine, and that'll knock you out. But your body is always looking to get back into that balance and centeredness, which, is ultimately all good health is about balance between the magnetic and the electric within the light body, right? So you are regulating your own EMF without realizing it, right? You're trying to deal with this extraordinarily toxic situation all the time, and some people are doing it better than others. I talk to a lot of people who are extremely sensitive, can't touch stuff, get, burning ears, headaches, all sorts of things. And they really appreciate our products because they're like, this is the only thing that's worked for me, and I get a lot of feedback like that, which is great because, we're helping those people. But I would say that everyone is sensitive, like your son was talking about, you're talking about your son's kind of chronic fatigue. It's definitely contributing. There's no chance that it isn't because he's conditioned electrically to respond badly to these vibrations. What I would just point out as well is that a lot of people talk about frequencies, but they don't understand what they are, right? Because frequency is just a number. It is just a number. It's a number that describes a phenomenon. And the phenomenon is something I touched upon earlier on, but I'm going to just spell it out so it's really clear. An atomic field, right, an atom, basically compresses itself into a light ring, like we've seen in our blood cells and so on, and also the electric current passing down the tube. It compresses itself into a torus field of light. But then it has another phase. So if you like, it draws the energy from that magnetic point to make itself into a torus field, and then it discharges itself back into the empty space. So we've got a massive amount of space compressing itself into a tiny, tiny atom and then discharging itself back into the empty space. And that process, flicking on and off, it's a light ring, right? But it flicks on and off so fast that it gives the illusion of matter, right? It gives the illusion. So every cell in my body, in my hands, is flicking on and off so fast that they look like, solid hands, material hands. It looks like matter, but it's actually, and it's the same thing in this glass. And it's the same thing in this water, in this glass. All of the atoms in here are flicking on and off in rapid succession. But the difference between me and the glass is that I have a mind to move my atoms around, right? But frequency is just measuring the speed of the oscillation or the alternation between compression and expansion, charge, discharge, compression, expansion, charge, discharge. And, if you want to take that one step further, one of the things that Laki told me is that there are many phrases in science that just don't make any sense. And I'll give you 3 of them, if you don't mind, just to underline how we are completely hypnotized by nonsense. Okay. One of them is negative charge. Okay. Everyone talks about negative charge or positive ions, or, even grounding, they describe in a weird way of like exchanging electrons and that thing. But negative charge, to charge something is to increase it, right? When you charge up your car, you're increasing the battery of the car, right? Negative means to reduce, right? So how can you negatively increase something? You can't. So what's actually happening? It's discharge versus charge. Discharge versus charge, right? So that's one thing. And then another thing is, a massive body of science has been built around the concept that opposites attract. Now, we don't have any evidence of that happening in our lives. If me and you don't get on, we're not going to see each other every weekend, right? Yeah. We're not. Our lives are not filled with opposites attract. It doesn't happen. Yes, maybe some relationships are a bit toxic because of past traumas, and that's a bit more complicated. But basically what they do is they see 2 magnets, north and a south, and it's like, oh, north and a south, they want to come together. So therefore north is opposite to south, therefore all opposites attract. And then they build a whole model around ions and electrons and everything else. But actually what's happening is that at the end of the north and the end of the south magnet, you've got very imbalanced conditions happening, because there's nowhere for the energy to go, right? And so what happens is that they want to gravitate together because they're both in balanced conditions. They're like each other, and they both come together and lock in. And then all of those imbalanced conditions are voided because of that. So that's part of the model that, Walter Russell was laying out, and then Laki has taken to many more, more steps beyond that with proofs and evidence in his papers. So like I mentioned, he talks a lot about electromagnetism, but that's another one where it's like, oh, opposites attract in science. No, they don't, because that doesn't happen in our natural lives. We know this intuitively. We know this. So it's another area where, people have been fooled. Like, so we've got the atom, which is, I don't think, well, from all the evidence I've shown you here, we know that the cell, we know that the particle, as we showed you in that gas evacuated tube, and the cell. I can show you a picture of a tungsten and the atom. Like I can show you a picture of the tungsten atom, which is magnified 2,700 times, where you see very clearly in the center a black hole, and around the outside of the tungsten atom you see this hexagonal structure of light. And so we see the atom, we see the cell, and we see the particle all being torus fields of light with a magnetic point in the center. So once we understand that and adjust our thinking towards that, then we can see a new model emerging, right, where like attracts like. And that explains resonance and dissonance. And by the way, when I talked about the guitar experiment, the A string vibrating with the A string, right? So the guitar that wasn't plucked, that A string starts to vibrate in sympathy. Well, that's what's happening with EMF, meaning that our bodies have a range of frequencies, right? Remember that we're talking about frequency is the alternation between the electric current compressing and expanding. It's just a number. We're just measuring how quickly something compresses and expands, right? So if that number in our bodies is in the same range as the number of the electric currents being broadcast by EMF, by Wi-Fi, by cell towers, then we have a situation of dissonance, okay? And there are many papers which show that the military knows exactly which range of frequencies are going to harm the body the most. And guess what? 5G is being built on that frequency range. So we have got a lot of trouble coming down the pipe when 5G really goes, mass public. And it's happening. It's happening left, right, and center. They're just charging ahead. They've done no safety testing on 5G, none at all. And they've totally ignored all of the animal studies that show that animals are getting cancers and oxidative stress and infertility also happening in the human race. And they get heart problems and brain problems and, DNA strand breaks. Why? Because it's vibrational, right? It's nothing to do with heat. So the traditional model of assessing whether radiation is harmful is all about heat. But I'm here to tell you that if you know the real truth about the atom and you understand that all atoms are either in balance, with the magnetic and the electric, or they're out of balance, right? Meaning they're toxic, then you understand that this is a vibrational thing, not a thermal thing. And what we do at Omnia is we correct that magnetic point and put it back into the center of the light ring just by an energy imprint that goes into a sticker, and our stickers look like that. So inside that Omnia sticker is a perfectly balanced field of light that meets the imbalance around the phone and sets it back to a balanced vibration. And once you do that, then the body breathes a huge sigh of relief. I think I went all over the place with that answer, I don't know if I...
No, that's cool. Something that came up just as a slight aside while you were talking about the fact that everything's light and it's flashing, very, very fast. So instantly I'm thinking, well, we know we're made of energy. I've always said, our bodies are energy and this, that, and the other. But however, and we know matter is, well, we've been taught, if this is still correct, a lower vibrating frequency, which is why it's matter as opposed to up in the ethereal when it's fast. That's one theory, right?
Yeah. So
if everything's light and it's flashing at however many gazillion times a second, how is it that it still is? If we're just light, how are we still matter? How is it that I can't put my fingers through my hand and I can't? You know what I mean?
So this is where consciousness is so important, because I don't know what something that Laki showed me was incredible. And I actually remember seeing this when I was a kid. There was a guy from, I think, Hungary, and he used to put, I think his name was Mirin Dallo or something like that. And he used to put swords through his chest.
Yeah.
Right. How can he do that? Because he has mastered the illusion and the hologram. And he's realized that his body is entirely light, and so is the sword. And so he's able to master that program and put a sword through his chest, right? Now, I'm not saying everyone should try that at home, but it gives an example of how the illusion could be broken. And part of the matrix that we're living in is constant programming of association or attachment with the physical. You know, if you look at Buddhism, for example, it's all about the opposite of that, which is detachment from the physical and the, you know, and understanding the energy side of everything. So this is basically, on one level, you could say it's programming, but ultimately, what is happening is all of your cells are. So if you imagine that there's space around my hand, right? There's space around my hand, and that space is full of still magnetic light, right? So if I move my hand from here to here, it's operating with the still magnetic light over here. Move it over to here, the still magnetic light around my hand here. And what's happening is all the cells in my body are pulling in the energy to make themselves and discharge themselves from those magnetic points so that they become electric torus fields of light, right? Now, that has a certain frequency, which has some kind of permanence, if you like, but certainly solidity and mass, right? Which means that when like meets like, there is a resistance, right? So the light, when I go like this, it's the light in this hand pressing against the light in that hand. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it's not like light is just, it's not like light is like smoke where you just punch through it. That's not the way it is in our bodies. And that's what you're talking about there, which is like smoke is super, super fast vibrating stuff, right? And for example, when you burn a fire, because of all of that heat, the smoke is produced, right? And interestingly, the smoke goes upwards, right? Why? Because it's always looking to meet like conditions, right? So for the same reason, your body drops to earth if you jump out of a plane. Why? Because your body is looking to meet like conditions in the earth, right? So you jump up in the air, you always fall back down again. People are going to tell you that's all about gravity, but it's not. It's about the core principle of like attracting like. And once you get your head around these new concepts and you understand the world and the universe in a slightly different way, you become a little bit more empowered, right? In terms of your own physical, you know, your own experience of life, but also your own knowledge. So I don't know if that answers your question, but ultimately, if you think about the difference between smoke, which is going so fast that you can just punch through it, and something that's a lower vibration that just goes, you know, stodgy hands meeting together like that, and then the resistance of that light, it hits, you know.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my explanation. Laki would probably have a much better explanation than I've just given, but that's one of my explanations.
But no, that's cool, because we want a simpler explanation. And I can hear some people listening to this going, what? You know, because no such thing as gravity. It reminds me of an ex, and also a friend.
I wouldn't say no such thing as gravity, but just the interpretation of gravity, like, you know, the way that it's explained. Because again, gravity is just one of those theories, you know. And you'll find that science is full of theories, you know. And I've just given my theory, to be fair. So well, not my theory, but the theory that I've learned. So you know, I'm not saying there's no gravity. We all know from our experience that, you know, objects of mass fall to the biggest object of mass, which is the Earth, right? That's simple. But what I am saying is that if you adopt the principle of like attracts like, you explain gravity in a completely different way. Like when you burn wood, the fumes want to go up to meet those types of pressure condition, right? So the similar types of pressure and temperature condition want to meet each other. That's why smoke goes up. That's why we go down, because we're not made of smoke, you know? So that is just looking at things in a different way, but really understanding that the core principles in science are actually inversions of the truth, right? This is the satanic play that we're, you know, and the hypnosis that we're under, that will mean that we'll never understand our reality properly, and therefore we're completely lost. Whereas you can flip that round if you're open-minded enough to explore things like gravity in a new way.
Well, it's like anything, isn't it? It's like I always say, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And you were ready to hear Laki in a way that you might not have been 5 years before, you know, and obviously because of what you were going through health-wise. So you were on a quest. So for you, because there'll be some people listening going, what a load of crap. And then there'll be a lot of people listening going, wow, this is making a lot of sense. So for you, when you saw that talk, was it like just a deep knowing? You were like, wow, this makes so much sense.
Funnily enough, not really, because the talk was pretty awful. I just say that because, look, I say it's a bit harsh, and I hope he doesn't hear me say that. But basically, Laki is Serbian, right? So his first language is Serbian. Obviously, he speaks 6 different languages, and English is only one of them. He's one of those people that's so intelligent and so kind of he brings so many profound truths that he's operating on a different level to me. Yeah, certainly. You know, he's way up there. And for him to bring it down, I think one of my skills is actually to translate what he's saying and bring it into real world experiences or relatable stuff. I think that's one of my skills, because I'm not a scientist, but I've listened to him and I've delved through a number of his papers, and I've gone, right, how are people going to understand this when I get through to them? And I'm kind of like a bit of a messenger for him, I guess, because the talk he was giving was all about his energy discovery, which is that he's discovered a new unit of energy. You know, like we talk about units of energy being like an electron or a tachyon or a photon. And he's found this new unit of energy, which he calls deca energy. And it basically looks like a dodecahedron, and it holds 12 cones of spinning light inside it. So it's the most perfectly balanced unit of energy you can have, because the magnetic point is always at the absolute geometric center of the dodecahedron, right? That's the unit of energy that he uses to put into the sticker to balance the EMF, right? So this is all about the magnetic point being put back into the geometric center. So he's found this way of doing that. I still don't know how he captures the deca energy and then puts them in the sticker. He won't tell me, because he's scared that I might run off and do him over. I won't, but that's his fear, so he doesn't tell me. But from my perspective and my reality, I've tested his product, and it works very well on blood. You know, this is, when I showed you this earlier on, this picture here is a picture of me holding a cell phone for 20 minutes. And then the blood goes back to normal, you know, from that, you know, it just literally went back instantly, you know. So you were talking earlier on about, you know, is it worth going to get healing when you're bombarded by EMF all the time? Yes, because your body is reacting in real time at all times. And I'll tell you another thing is that I mess about with things like muscle tests, right? If I do a muscle test with you, I'm pretty sure that this would happen with you as well. If I said to you, show me how strong you are, and we measured how strong you are, and then I said, put a phone in your hand, and then you went weak because there was no protection on your phone. And then I said to you, Mel, we're going to say a prayer of protection. We're going to protect your body's energy field from EMF. And we said it together. I said, repeat after me, you know, and I'll say a little prayer. I won't say it here, but then if we did the muscle test after that, you'd be like strong. Boom. What's the problem? The problem is that wears off.
Yeah.
As your conscious intent drifts everywhere else. And then before you know it, in half an hour, you're weak again, because your mind has broken that kind of energy field that was surrounding you for that moment, right? And to some extent, that's what we do with our products. We put that prayer in there permanently as a kind of protective, conscious intent bubble around you to harmonize all of the EMF. And harmonizing means literally making sure that both of the fields are vibrating with the same rhythm and balance, right? So that's when you create harmony between those two fields, the cell and the EMF, right?
Cool. Yeah.
So that's the power of conscious intent, everybody.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I was just thinking that because, you know, if you think about all the things that you want to do every day, like your morning routine, right? And then you're setting your intentions, you're doing your affirmations, you're doing your meditation. You might want to do a little energy ritual of protection, like you just said. And it, you know, to maintain that on a daily basis, every day, including weekends, is very, very challenging. Well, it is certainly for me, and I know it is for a lot of people because you just get out of the habit, or you have some stress that comes in, which knocks you out of your routine, and the routine goes out the window. And all the good things you should be doing and carrying on doing while you're stressed go out the window because all you're thinking about is the stress and the fear and everything else. So it makes perfect sense to me. What I'd like to ask you, because I know, I don't know, is that showing up all right?
Yep.
Because sometimes, because I have this background, there we go, it stops there. So I've got a sticker on my phone, which I told you about, which I believe is silver, shungite, maybe something else. Price wise, cheaper than what you're offering. And I know, like, you know, people that I sort of knock around with various versions of stickers on their phone. So why, and I've got it on the back of my laptop, why is yours so different? But before you answer that, actually, what I did want to ask you, so you went to this Laki talk, which was terrible, but you got the gist of what he was trying to get across, and obviously that furthered your conversations, and you wanted to try it. Can you remember what the first experience was like for you when you were, I don't know whether it was with a sticker or whether it was another thing that you did. What was that like for you?
Well, I immediately took some of his stickers because he had them in his pocket, and they had Nikola Tesla on them because he's a huge fan of Tesla and Walter Russell. And I said, can I borrow some? And I'd made some friends at the festival and I knew how to do muscle testing. So I said, do you want to have a little bit of fun? Let's do a muscle test. And I muscle tested them with the phone, and then I put the sticker on their phone and they went super strong. And I was like, we have something here. This is important. Presumably people want strong bodies when they're holding a cell phone, right? I mean, if you don't, then you must be some kind of idiot. So that was the immediate experience. And then it was just like, but wait, this is just a sticker. Everything I've learned I'm not ready to understand that. So tell me more about it. And that's when we got into the whole, everything is the light. There's light in the sticker, the imbalanced light, invisible light, imbalanced invisible light around the phone is basically imbalance between the magnetic and the electric. And that's when I just went, right, I'm getting more than I bargained for here. I'm getting the real reason why man-made radiation is different to sunlight. I'm getting the real reason why non-ionizing and ionizing is just only a fraction of the story, because non-ionizing and ionizing is all about heat, whereas this is actually all about vibration. And the science of vibration is not taught in our textbooks. They don't want us to know about vibration because otherwise we're going to raise our vibration, and that's what this current kind of ascension process is all about, right? Is all about understanding. When people say, oh, I'm going to raise my frequency, well, what do you mean by that? It means that your blood cells are going to go compression expansion sequence even faster. And then we can also explain why, if there are external events happening around us, why we might raise our frequency because of those external events, like the Schumann resonance. So, there's three things going on right now, which is that human consciousness is raising, which raises our vibration. And then there's Mother Earth, whose, vibration is raising through the Schumann resonance and everything else. But then there's also cosmic changes as well through the sun. And all of those three things are a perfect cocktail for our light bodies to start lifting. And what's happening? The government is trying to throw every single thing they possibly can at us while this happens, right? Whether it's COVID or COVID or, everything they can, digital IDs, they're trying to desperately keep us in that prison and have us beg to be put in that prison. But as far as I'm concerned, it's not going to happen, and we must all be responsible for our energy field as we navigate these choppy times. It's not easy, like you said, but when you notice yourself going off balance or into stress, then you need to have that little system whereby you go, okay, thank you for this stressful moment. I observe myself from my higher self in this state, and thank you for showing me this state, but I no longer require you. Yeah. And then you can say a little sort of, I choose to be the, healthiest, happiest, fittest, strongest, most honorable version of these four divine bodies. Yeah. And you go back into a place where it's like, it's okay, So that's kind of like how I navigate it. Choose your way. Choose the thing that works for you.
And so, why is your sticker better than my sticker?
Well, I'm not going to get into a kind of like a dogfight with anyone. If you have to choose what works for you, right? And all I can say is this is how you choose, right? There's 4 things that you need to know when you're choosing your EMF protection. Number 1, does the product get good test results on the body? Right, that's very important because there are 2 types of product out there. One is a blocker and the other one is harmonizer. What I know about blockers is they try and reduce the field strength from like 100 down to 1 or 2. But when you put a blocker on your phone, the body still goes weak, right? Even with that 1 or 2. So that's something to know about. And you must see test results on the body. We have done tests on the heart. The heart is a big electrical pump, right? We know this. It's the epicenter of electrical activity in our bodies, more so than the brain. The heart's rhythms get disturbed by just holding a cell phone. You put our sticker on, the heart rhythms go back to normal. We get good test results on HRV, on bioresonance, on ART, autonomic response testing, on biogeometry as well, right? Those are, tests that we get really good results on. Our bodies are full of water. So I'll show you this because this is our water crystal photography test. And when you put a sticker on a phone, and then the way you do this test is you fill a glass of water and you put the phone on top of the water and the water listens to the phone radiation, and then you freeze it and photograph it. And then if crystals come out that look like hexagonal structure, then that's the optimal structure of water. So in this instance, this is a 5G field, totally destroying the water molecule. Why is that bad news for you? Because your body is 70% water. So that's the water crystal photography that we've done. We've done applied kinesiology, we've done bioresonance and all those other tests, and we've done live blood, which I've shown you earlier on, right? So number 1, you must see good test results on the body. If you haven't seen good test results for your product that you're holding up there, how do you know it's working?
Yeah, true.
Honestly, how do you know it's working? So the second thing is you need to have an explanation for what the problem is. And I've given you ours extensively, right? Which is that magnetic point is not imbalanced with that electric current, right? And once you make balance between those 2, then the body listens to this new field because of resonance and goes, oh, thank God you've just removed all of that stress, around me. Number 3 is good reviews. So if you haven't seen good reviews for your product, be suspicious. We've got lots of very good reviews on our site because many, many people are electromagnetically hypersensitive, and as soon as they put our stickers on, their lives change. Genuinely, I'm not just saying that. Their sleep returns to normal. They get less burning sensations around the phone, less tingles in their arms and ears, less kind of what do you call it? That high pitched shrill. Less of that. So good reviews. And then the only other thing I can say is that we're using that quantum energy field which no one else is using. So and that seems to work very well. I had never heard of it before I'd met Laki. Laki's been using it for like 15 years. I am desperate for Laki to create something with that unit of energy that actually has another purpose, because he claimed when I met him, first of all, to be able to develop air conditioning units that had no plugs, that you could just go up and basically put your conscious intent into to maintain 18 degrees in a room at all times. I'm like, this is amazing. Make it and I'll sell it, but he hasn't done it yet. But that's one of his dreams. I hope that he comes up with something else soon. But look, obviously I sell a product and I know it helps people. You as a sovereign being, I'm telling you how to choose it. I'm not telling you to choose our product. I'm telling you how to choose it. And it's obvious, but you probably didn't realize it before I just told you. Test results on the body, good reviews, a proper explanation for what the problem is and how you solve the problem, and then understand how it works. And for me, explaining to people how it works is really tough, because everyone's got that resistance to a sticker being able to do what our stickers do. And I totally understand that. But we still have a lot of customers. So, and we get very few returns because people get the stickers and then they can do the test at home.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, what did you feel? Did you feel better? Yeah, I did. Did you get better sleep? Most of the people do. Did you get less headaches? Yeah. So that's all I can say.
Do they work on things like smart meters?
Oh, yeah. So all man-made electrical currents are imbalanced, all of them. And if you think about it one step further in a bit more of a kind of like woo-woo sense, why do we go to work? To pay the bills. What is the consciousness of the electricity grid? It's a slave system. It is the ultimate slave system. Why do you go to work? To pay the bills. Why are the bills there? Because they've kidded you that energy is not free. And what's more, they've put energy into a system whereby you extract it, you pay for it. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. You can't put free energy. Well, you should be able to put free energy systems in your home. But funnily enough, all the people inventing free energy end up at the bottom of a river, right? And that's the world we live in. It's a nasty world, as you know, where the controllers are desperately trying to keep their control. So the consciousness of the electricity grid is bad vibration. It is just an inherently consciously bad vibration that our conscious bodies, conscious electric light bodies, listen to and go, oh, I don't like that. I don't resonate with that. So it doesn't matter whether it's a smart meter or dirty electricity or anything, it's all coming out with the same consciousness. The problem with EMF is that it is just so ever present. And that, just so you know, the three issues with EMF are proximity. So how close you are to the field. Are you touching it? Are you a meter away from it? Makes a massive difference. If you're a meter away from it, your body will stay strong. As soon as you touch it, the electric circuit in the body goes blah, don't like it, right? So proximity, then it's the strength of the signal. Is it 2G, 3G, 5G, and is that 5G in the same frequency band as your body? That's the second thing. And the third thing is your exposure time, which is like how long per day you're on your devices. Most of us, that's bad news, right? It's like at least 7 or 8 hours a day. And some people sleep with their phones under their pillows, which is an extremely bad idea. And some people put smartwatches on their arms, which is even worse idea, because you are mainlining 24/7 imbalanced energy up your arm. Not a good idea, nor are wireless headphones, he said, with his headphones on, but these are wired. But that's just so that, you can hear me properly.
Yeah. Well, it's all fascinating stuff, Tim. To me, everything you've said makes perfect sense. I'm not scientific in the slightest. There's a reason for that, which I now realize is because everything's been inverted and perverted. I couldn't get on with it at school, especially physics.
Nor can I.
Physics Biology was probably the one that I could relate to the most. Physics, not a chance. Um, so it makes
Because
perfect.
it was all wrong, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
If you look at the electrolysis experiments and stuff like that, and they try and give you this super complicated ion exchange thing, and it's just so rubbish. Whereas when you explain things like that with like attracts like, it's so simple. And anyway, that I've done a whole video with Laki where he explains all of his core concepts. For anyone who found the physics side of what I've said interesting, you can find that on my Omnia Balance YouTube. It's basically a response to Terence Howard. Do you remember when Terence Howard came out and said all sorts of wacky stuff about the atom and his, 1+1 = 2 and, no, 1 × 1 = 2 and all sorts of other things. We did a response to that where we just went deep into Walter Russell's science and said, this is where Terence was right and this is where he was wrong. And anyone that really liked the physics side of what I said can go and watch that video because they'll get a lot of aha moments.
Well, if you share that link with me, I'll put it obviously in the show notes.
Sure.
Where's the best place for people to go and find out more about you and the wonderful products?
Yeah, just my website, omniaradiationbalancer.com. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that's what it is. Omnia, OMNIA, radiationbalancer.com. But I'm also on social media, mainly as Omnia Balance, because it's shorter and easy to remember. And I'm on TikTok and Instagram and other places. Necessary evils, I don't particularly want to be on there all day, but
no, I know.
As a brand owner, I sort of have to be. Otherwise, my product is impossible to advertise. It's impossible because it's a sticker, because there's no market awareness of this at all. Like me and you, yes, we know about it, but the amount of people taking action is less than 1 out of 100, and no one's being told about this at all. But people are starting to realize it. But I've got the added problem of not just talking to people about in a cold audience, an advertised audience. You've got to tell them what the problem is, but then you've got to build all this trust about your solution. And it's almost impossible when people's attention spans are nanoseconds. So coming on a show like this and just explaining a bit more about what we do, how it works and how we know it works is I'm very grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Very enlightening, very informative. I know some of my audience are going to absolutely love it. And I like to finish these conversations, Tim, with anything you feel called to share before we finish up.
Well, I guess only that, it's the message of hope. I know I was just watching your video with Steve, was it Steve Forsyth? He doesn't use the word hope, but it's like that deep faith that it's going to be all right. And if you understand the technology in your body in a different way, which I've tried to explain in this hour, then that gives you a little bit more of a more power inside to know that you can charge your body up. And remember that you are a cell tower too. So you are broadcasting your energy as a cell tower at all times of the day. So my question to you is, what are you broadcasting? Because if you're broadcasting the fear of a war rather than broadcasting your will for peace, you could just walk around saying, what if I am the peace that's waking up in the world? You could say that 10 times a day and it makes a difference, right? They don't want you to know that. They want you to be in fear of war all the time because that is a fearful thing, right? But it's always an illusion because it's not happening to you yet. You hope it's never going to happen to you, but it's the imagination of it that keeps you locked in, a bad vibration, whereas you are in control. So just be conscious of what you're broadcasting out to the world. Is it a message? Is it love? Is it peace? Is it compassion? Is it gratitude? Is it, community? Or is it the opposite?
Yeah, absolutely. And with your explanation on we're all light and the cells are light, I mean, I've been signing off emails love and light for quite a long time now. So that makes perfect sense to me.
There we go.
Again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Mel.
And take care. And I reckon you might get a few more customers.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.